Don't stop. Please, whatever you do, don't stop. That black pickup. It's been following us for 2 miles. Her voice was barely louder than the whisper of tires on asphalt, but inside the enclosed cab of my rig it hit like a gunshot. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, feeling sweat gather in my palms, and slowly shifted my eyes to the side mirror. There, in the absolute darkness of Interstate 40, somewhere on the empty stretch between Amarillo and Albuquerque, hung 2 dim yellow dots. Headlights. They held the perfect distance, never gaining, never falling back. It was 1:47 a.m. The hour when normal people sleep in warm beds, while truckers like me fight the hypnosis of white lane markings and pour gallons of stale gas station coffee down our throats just to stay awake. I was already 11 hours into my shift. 80,000 pounds of steel and freight hummed behind me in a low, steady bass note. I knew this route like I knew my own hands. The Texas Panhandle eased into the deserts of New Mexico, and for dozens of miles in every direction there was nothing but coyotes, tumbleweeds, and the occasional exit leading nowhere. Rule number 1 at my company was simple. No passengers. Ever. Under any circumstances. Insurance wouldn't cover it, and the statistics on missing people along these highways spoke for themselves. But 20 minutes earlier, I had broken that rule. I saw her standing on the shoulder near an abandoned rest area. She wasn't hitchhiking. She just stood there with her back pressed against a rusted speed limit sign, clutching some kind of bundle to her chest. In the beam of my high lights, her face looked deathly pale, and her eyes were huge, wild with animal terror. She wore only a thin denim jacket, useless against the sharp desert cold. But what caught my attention most was the bundle. It was a child. Wrapped in a dirty fleece blanket. Completely motionless. I slammed on the brakes. The tractor growled in protest, air brakes hissing, and it took nearly a quarter mile to bring the beast to a full stop. I hit the hazard lights, flooding the shoulder with pulsing orange flashes, and waited. In the right mirror, I watched the small figure run through the dust toward my cab. When she climbed inside, the smell of cold night air rushed in, old sweat, and something else. Panic. That metallic, sour scent of adrenaline. She didn't thank me. She just collapsed into the passenger seat, clutching the child, and stared straight ahead. I tried talking to her, asking where she needed to go, but she only shook her head. The boy, maybe 3 years old, didn't make a sound. He looked at me from under the blanket with blank, unblinking eyes. I decided I'd take them to the first major truck stop with police nearby and pressed the accelerator. We drove about 10 miles in complete silence, broken only by the drone of the diesel engine. Then she said it. Don't stop. I checked the mirror again. The yellow headlights were still there. Do you know who that is? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Panic spreads fast, and inside the cab of a speeding truck at night, it can be deadly. She didn't answer. She only pressed herself harder into the seat, eyes shut tight. Her breathing became short and ragged. I noticed her fingers trembling where they gripped the blanket. I decided to test her story. I eased off the throttle, letting our speed drop from 70 to 60. The big rig slowed. I watched the mirror, expecting the pickup, as any normal driver on an empty highway would, to move left and pass me. It didn't. The two yellow lights slowed too. The distance between us stayed the same. About 200 feet. A chill crawled down my spine. I clicked on my signal and moved smoothly into the left lane, pretending to pass a vehicle that wasn't there. The pickup slid into the left lane behind me. I moved back right. It copied me. This wasn't coincidence. We were being shadowed. Who the hell is that? My voice hardened. I reached for the CB mic hanging overhead. Channel 19 usually always had someone listening. Breaker 19, this is Night Wolf. Anybody westbound on I-40 near mile marker 280? Come back. Nothing but the flat hiss of static. I adjusted the squelch. Still nothing. Dead air. That was strange for a major artery like I-40, even at 2 in the morning. The woman beside me let out a soft, strangled sob. My husband, she whispered without opening her eyes. And his brothers. If they catch us, they'll kill me. And him. She looked down at the child. They'll take him back. To the camp. The word camp cut through me. This didn't sound like an ordinary family dispute. There was something final in her tone, like someone fleeing something cultish, something isolated and rotten to the core. New Mexico is known for more than sunsets. There are communities out there that live by their own dark laws, far from civilization. I glanced in the mirror again. My breath caught. The headlights were gone. The pickup hadn't taken an exit, there were none. They had simply switched off their lights. At 60 miles an hour. In total darkness. A few car lengths behind an 80,000-pound semi. It was pure madness. They killed their lights, I said, pulse hammering in my temples. The woman spun toward the window, staring into the blackness. He's close. I know he's close. Please. Step on it. I buried the pedal. The turbo whined. The speedometer climbed slowly. 65. 70. 75. The trailer swayed lightly in the crosswind. I stared into the mirrors until my eyes burned, trying to make out any shape in the darkness behind us. Nothing. Only the red glow of my own marker lights reflecting off the pavement. 1 minute passed. Then 2. Then 3. I started to think maybe he'd fallen back. Maybe he lost his nerve. Maybe he'd turned onto some dirt road I hadn't noticed. My breathing steadied a little. I reached for my thermos to take a sip of coffee. That was when the cab shuddered from a violent impact. A deep metallic crash rang through the trailer. Coffee splashed across my jeans, burning my skin. The woman screamed. The child, silent until now, exploded into piercing hysterical sobs. What the hell? He had rammed the rear bumper of my trailer. A heavy pickup, lights off, doing nearly 80, had intentionally slammed into the back of my rig. The steering wheel jerked in my hands. I locked both fists around it and fought to steady the truck. If the trailer started fishtailing at that speed, we'd roll and turn into twisted metal and fire. Another hit. Harder this time. In the glow of my rear lights, I caught a glimpse of it. A huge lifted Ford F-250 painted matte black. No plates. At least 3 silhouettes behind the windshield. They weren't trying to stop us. They were trying to run us off the road. To the right stretched a deep ditch filled with gravel and scrub brush. Going into that at highway speed meant certain death. Hold on. I shouted, flipping on every auxiliary light mounted to the cab. The pickup dropped back a few yards, then lunged up the left side. It pulled even with my trailer. I saw it in the left mirror, a black beast devouring asphalt. The passenger window rolled down. I couldn't make out a face in the darkness, but I saw the long dark barrel jutting from the window. A shotgun. Down. Get on the floor. Now. I grabbed the woman by the shoulder and shoved her beneath the dash. She curled around the screaming child. The blast came. It didn't sound like the movies. More like a vicious crack of a whip. My left side mirror exploded, showering the door in shards. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would crack my ribs. I had no weapon. All I had was weight. My truck outweighed them 40-1. And if they wanted to play dirty, I had one card left to use. The pickup accelerated, trying to pull level with my cab. I knew what they wanted. Shoot me through the window. Make the truck lose control. I waited until their hood lined up with my front wheels. I saw the shotgun barrel glinting in my marker lights. Saw the tense hands holding it. Then I yanked the wheel left. The mass of my tractor lurched toward them. I didn't hit them, that would have been suicide. I simply closed the gap 2 inches, squeezing them toward the oncoming lane and then onto the gravel median. Tires screamed. The pickup driver jerked left on instinct, trying to avoid my steel wall. The black Ford dropped into the gravel. In the dim light, I saw it fishtail. A huge cloud of dust rose. The truck spun once. And vanished into the darkness behind us. I never lifted off the throttle. I wrung everything I could out of the engine. 85. 90. The cab shook. The engine roared at the edge of redline. Did we lose them? The woman asked, raising her head from beneath the dash. I don't know. Stay down. I kept scanning the one surviving right mirror and the darkness beyond. 15 minutes passed. Every second dragged like an hour. I expected that black hood to reappear at any moment. But the highway stayed empty. Then, far ahead on the horizon, I saw a glow. The lights of Albuquerque. More importantly, the bright, sprawling lights of a pilot travel center only a couple miles ahead. I flew into the lot, ignoring the speed limit signs, and braked hard right in front of the main entrance under blinding white floodlights beside a dozen other semis. The place was full of people. Drivers smoking, drinking coffee, fueling up. I killed the engine. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't pull the keys from the ignition. The woman on the floor was quietly crying, rocking the child. I called the police. They arrived 10 minutes later. 2 patrol cruisers with lights flashing. I told them everything. Showed them the shattered mirror. The dents in the trailer bumper. The woman and child were taken away in an ambulance. She never looked at me when she left. Her eyes were empty, like her soul had already gone. Police searched 50 miles back along I-40. They found skid marks in the gravel. And nothing else. No pickup. No men. No shell casings. The black Ford F-250 had dissolved into the New Mexico desert. I never drove that route again. I quit the company a week later. But even now, when I'm driving my own car at night and someone behind me switches off their headlights, I feel cold sweat slide down my back. Because I know there are things hiding in the dark that do not want to be found. And if you happen to cross them, they'll follow you to the end. If you're listening to this right now, sitting alone in a dark room or behind the wheel of your car, do me a favor. Leave a comment telling me what city you're in, and what time it is where you are. It helps me feel like I'm not alone in this darkness. And if this story made you check the locks on your doors, hit like. Now let's move on to the next nightmare. The third time that week, I pulled over beside the same rusted sedan. The dust around it was completely untouched. No boot prints. No footprints. No marks of any kind. But the worst part was this. There were no tire tracks. None at all. The car looked as if it had fallen straight from the sky onto the shoulder of old, God-forgotten Route 66. It was 3:18 a.m. I worked as a maintenance engineer for cellular towers, and my territory covered some of the most remote parts of Oklahoma. My job was to drive at night from tower to tower, reboot servers, replace power units, and make sure people kept their internet. To save time and avoid looping around on the toll highway, I often used the abandoned stretches of Route 66. These days, that road is only a shadow of what it once was. Cracked asphalt with dead grass pushing through it. Abandoned motels with shattered windows. Rotting gas station signs that hadn't seen fuel since the 80s. At night, the silence out there is total. Smothering. It's just you, your vehicle, and miles of emptiness. The first time I saw the sedan was Tuesday. It was an old boxy Ford Ltd Crown Victoria, maybe from the early 80s. Faded brown paint buried under thick rust and dust. It sat crooked on flat tires at the edge of the road. I drove past without a second thought. Just another abandoned hunk of scrap metal. There were hundreds of them out there. Thursday, I took the same route again. And there it was. But something felt wrong. My brain, trained to memorize landmarks in the dark, started sounding alarms. The car was in a different place. 5 miles farther down the road from where I'd seen it Tuesday. I slowed, peering through the dark windows. Empty. I told myself someone had tried towing it, snapped the chain, and dumped it again. Perfectly logical explanation. But tonight was Saturday. And it was here again. Another 7 miles farther down Route 66. Right at a sharp bend where the road curved around a dry riverbed. This time, curiosity beat common sense. I parked my work pickup about 100 feet behind the sedan, leaving the engine running and headlights on. From the passenger seat I grabbed my heavy mag-light flashlight, part club, and stepped out. The night cold hit my face. The air smelled like dry earth and sagebrush. Gravel crunched beneath my boots. My footsteps sounded unnaturally loud in that dead silence. I aimed the beam at the car. Yes. Same Ford. Same dent in the left fender. Same cracked rear window patched with yellowing tape. I moved closer, sweeping the light across the ground. Then I slowed. Stopped about 3 feet from the rear bumper. The flashlight beam skimmed over the shoulder. The ground there was made of fine red dust mixed with sand. Any movement left deep impressions. My own footprints were clearly stamped behind me. But around the Ford, the dust was perfectly smooth. Untouched. I circled the car. Not a single human footprint. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. No tire treads led from the sunken, flat tires. The car hadn't driven there. It hadn't been dragged there either, no grooves, no scrape marks. It looked as if someone had lowered it gently into place with a giant crane. But there were no tracks from heavy equipment. Only an empty highway and endless desert. A cold shiver crept up the back of my neck. The hair on my arms stood up. My rational mind scrambled for an explanation and found none. The wind had erased the tracks? Impossible. There hadn't been wind for days, and the dust was too loose. I shined the light through the filthy driver's side window. Inside, everything was coated in gray mold and cobwebs. The seat upholstery had rotted away, exposing rusted springs. Something sat on the dashboard. I squinted and wiped the grime off the glass with my jacket sleeve. A photograph. A Polaroid. I didn't want to do it, but my hand reached for the door handle on its own. I pressed the button. To my surprise, the latch gave way with a hideous shriek of metal, and the door creaked open. A wave of unbearable stench rolled out. Stagnant air. Rot. And something else. Ozone. Like the smell after a lightning strike. Holding my breath, I reached in and picked up the photo. It was fresh. Bright colors. Glossy surface. Not a scratch on it. The picture showed my work pickup. taken from behind. And it had been taken only minutes earlier. My headlights were on in the image, and the driver's door stood open, the same door I had just stepped out of. My breath stopped. My lungs locked like ice. Someone had taken my picture while I walked toward this car. Someone had been behind me. That was when I heard it. The sound came from my pickup. A dry metallic click. The sound of a door closing. I spun so fast I dropped the photo. My flashlight beam snapped toward the truck. The engine was still running. The headlights blazed into my eyes. But inside the cab, in the driver's seat, sat a silhouette. A dark, heavy figure. Completely motionless. "Hey!" I shouted. My voice cracked, thin and pathetic. "What the hell are you doing in my truck?" The figure didn't move. Panic flooded me all at once. My phone, apartment keys, radio, everything was still inside that pickup. I stood in the middle of nowhere, 30 miles from the nearest house, with nothing but a flashlight in my hand. I took one step forward. Gravel crunched. Suddenly, my headlights went out. The engine died. Absolute blackness swallowed everything. Only the trembling beam of my flashlight cut through it. I aimed the light at the windshield. The cab was empty. The silhouette was gone. I breathed hard, cold sweat running into my eyes. How could it disappear? No doors had opened. I would have heard it. I would have seen movement in the beam. "Who's there?" I shouted into the dark. The only answer was a soft rustling sound. Dry grass moving. And it wasn't coming from the pickup. It came from the other side. Behind the rusted Ford. I slowly began backing toward my truck, never taking the beam off the sedan. My mind screamed, "Run!" My legs barely obeyed. I felt like prey. Like I had stepped into a perfectly laid trap. The rusted car was bait. The rustling came again. Closer now. As if something heavy was being dragged across the ground. SHRRRK. 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 I turned and ran for the pickup. I grabbed the driver's handle and yanked. Locked. Locked. I never lock my doors when I'm stepping out for 2 minutes in the desert. The dragging sound behind me grew louder. SHRRRK. SHRRRK. And now another sound joined it. Something that froze my blood solid. Wet, rasping breaths. Like someone with punctured lungs trying to suck in air. I slammed my fist against the window. My keys lay on the seat. I could see them in the flashlight beam. I gripped the Maglite flashlight with both hands and swung the heavy metal handle into the side glass. The window spiderwebbed, but held. The ragged breathing sounded directly behind me now. No more than 5 feet away. The stench of ozone and rot hit my nostrils so hard I nearly vomited. I struck the glass again with a scream of desperation. This time it exploded inward. Shards rained into the cab. I shoved my arm through the jagged opening, slicing skin on the edges, reached the lock tab, and pulled it up. The door opened. I threw myself inside, slammed it shut, and hit the central lock. That same instant, something smashed into the tailgate with incredible force. The pickup rocked sideways as if another vehicle had rammed it. With shaking, blood-slick hands, I grabbed the keys, jammed them into the ignition, and turned. The starter groaned. Whir. Nothing. Come on. Come on, damn you, start. I floored the gas pedal. A deafening impact struck the roof directly above my head. Metal buckled inward. A dent the size of a basketball punched into the ceiling. Whir. Vroom. The engine roared to life. I didn't turn on the lights. I just slammed the transmission into drive and mashed the accelerator. The rear tires sprayed gravel and rocks as the pickup launched forward. I drove the first couple miles in total darkness, steering only by the stars and the pale strip of asphalt, terrified that if I switched on the headlights, I'd see whatever had been chasing me in the rearview mirror. When I finally worked up the nerve to turn them on, the road was empty. I never slowed down until I reached Oklahoma City. I parked outside a 24-hour diner glowing with neon and sat there until dawn, clutching a cup of coffee that shook in my hands. In the morning, I inspected the truck. The tailgate was caved inward like it had been hit with a sledgehammer. The roof dent was even deeper. But the strangest thing was on the dusty rear window. There was a print. The smeared imprint of a massive six-fingered hand, dragged downward as if the thing had tried to hold on when I tore away. I quit that same day. I never called the police. I knew what they'd think. That I was crazy. I tried telling myself it had been a bear, or some deranged hermit living out there in the scrub. But bears don't take Polaroids. And bears don't appear from nowhere without leaving tracks in the dust. Sometimes, late at night, I open Google Earth and study satellite images of that stretch of Route 66. And every time I spot a dirty brown shape on the shoulder, I slam the laptop shut. Because I know it's waiting for the next person curious enough to stop. Please. She locked me in the trunk again. Get me out. She's coming. The voice was muffled, strained down to a whisper, but in the dead silence of that desert gas station it came through with terrifying clarity. I froze, gas nozzle still in my hand. The fuel had already stopped pumping, but I didn't even notice. My eyes were locked on the trunk of an old, faded burgundy Honda Accord parked beside the side wall of the building, in a patch of shadow untouched by the neon signs. It was 4:26 a.m. I was at a tiny, run-down gas station somewhere on the outskirts of Tonopah. If you've ever driven U.S. Highway 95 between Las Vegas and Reno, you know those places. Absolute, merciless nothingness. Hundreds of miles of scorched land, abandoned mines, and military test ranges. I'd been driving non-stop all night, trying to reach Reno by morning, and this station was my only chance not to run dry in the middle of the desert. The place looked like it hadn't been renovated since the 70s. 2 pumps. A flickering lamp over the canopy, swarmed by giant desert moths. A small square convenience store with barred windows. Inside, a dim fluorescent light buzzed weakly. I was the only customer. Except for that Honda. At first, I thought I imagined it. Hallucinations from sleep deprivation aren't unusual on drives like that. Then I heard it again. Knock. Knock knock. Knock. A rhythmic, desperate tapping from inside the Honda's trunk. Slowly, I returned the nozzle to the pump. My footsteps on the cracked concrete sounded deafening. I walked toward the car. A thick layer of dust coated the bumper, and someone had drawn a crooked smiley face in it with a finger. I bent closer to the narrow gap between the trunk lid and bumper. "Hey," I whispered. "Is someone in there?" A soft sob. Then the same child's voice, trembling with primitive terror. "Please. Help me. She said if I cry, she'll leave me in the desert. I can't breathe." It was a boy. Maybe 8 years old, judging by the voice. Something inside me dropped. The exhaustion vanished, replaced by sharp, freezing adrenaline. "What's your name, buddy?" I asked, trying to pry the trunk lid up with my fingers. It was locked tight. "I'm getting you out. Don't be scared." "Who locked you in there?" "My mom," the voice sobbed. "But she's not my mom. She took me from my house. Please don't let her see you. She'll kill both of us." I stood upright and looked toward the glass doors of the store. Through the dirty windows stacked with motor oil cans and cheap chips, I could see the register. Behind it stood a woman. She looked completely ordinary. Around 40. Hair tied in a messy bun. Faded flannel shirt. She was reading a magazine, chin resting lazily in one hand. No horns. No fangs. Just an exhausted woman working the night shift. But in the trunk of her car, a kidnapped child was dying of fear. My mind began racing. I couldn't just break the trunk open, I had no crowbar, and if I started smashing at the lock, she'd hear me and call the cops, saying I was trying to steal her car. Or worse. She might have a shotgun under the counter, which in Nevada is more common than not. I had to be smart. I had to call the police and keep her there until they arrived, without making her suspicious. I pulled out my phone. No signal. Not one bar. Middle of nowhere dead zone. That meant I had to go inside. Pretend to be a normal customer. Use the landline. Or maybe connect to Wi-Fi, if they even had any. "Hang in there, kid," I whispered into the crack. "I'm getting help. Stay quiet." I turned and walked toward the store. Every movement felt forced. I tried to look relaxed, hands in my pockets, though my whole body was wound tight like a spring. The bell above the door jingled as I stepped in. Inside, it smelled like stale coffee, dust, and cheap pine air freshener. Old drink coolers hummed against the wall. The woman behind the register looked up. Her stare was completely empty. No fatigue. No friendliness. Just two dark voids looking straight through me. "Evening," I said, forcing casualness into my voice. "Pump 2. And I'll take a coffee." She nodded silently and set the magazine aside. I walked to the coffee station in the back. As I poured a cup of black liquid that smelled scorched, I scanned the room. The landline phone sat right on the counter beside her hand. No chance of reaching it. Behind the register was a partly open stockroom door. Dark inside. I pretended to choose a candy bar and pulled out my phone again. I raised it higher, hoping for signal. Nothing. Emergency calls only. I dialed 911 and hit call. Silence. Then 3 short tones. The call wouldn't go through. The nearest tower was too far away. I was alone. Alone with a kidnapper. I walked back to the register and set down the coffee and candy bar. 32 on gas, plus this, I muttered, pulling out my wallet. She rang up the items. Her movements were slow and mechanical. I looked at her hands. Fresh scrapes across the knuckles. Dried blood under the nails. My stomach tightened. "Quiet night, huh?" I asked, trying to make conversation. I needed time. Needed a plan. She looked up at me. "It's always quiet here," she said. Her voice was hoarse, like she'd been screaming for hours. "People just pass through. Nobody stays." "That your Honda outside?" I asked, nodding toward the window. "Good car. Reliable." Her hand stopped above the register. Slowly, she raised her head. Her dark eyes fixed on my face. The air in the store seemed to thicken. The hum of the refrigerators suddenly sounded deafening. "Yes," she said softly. "It's mine. Why do you ask?" "Just noticed it." I tried to smile, though it felt more like a grimace. "Used to own one like it." She stared at me for a long 5 seconds. Then she slowly shifted her eyes to the security monitor hanging from the ceiling. The screen was divided into 4 feeds. One camera showed the side wall of the building. And on it, plain as day, was footage from 2 minutes earlier. Me, bent over at the trunk of her car. She had seen everything. My heart skipped. I instinctively stepped back. The woman didn't change expression. She didn't yell. Didn't reach for a weapon. She simply pressed a button beneath the counter. A loud metallic clunk came from the front entrance. The magnetic lock engaged. We were trapped inside. "You heard him, didn't you?" she said. Her voice had changed. The rasp was gone. Now it was flat. Cold. I slid my hand into my jacket pocket, gripping my keyring, forcing the keys between my fingers. My only weapon. "Open the door," I said firmly. "Open it, and I'll leave." She smiled. It was a broken, awful smile that never touched her eyes. "You're not leaving," she said. "You're too curious. Just like the man at the station in Beatty." He heard the knocking too. She stepped out from behind the counter. In her right hand gleamed a heavy steel wrench. "Open the trunk," I said, voice shaking though I held my ground. "Let the kid go. You're not getting away with this. I already called the cops. They'll be here any minute." It was a bluff. And she knew it. She laughed. Dry. Barking. "A child," she said, tilting her head like a bird studying a worm. "What child?" "The boy. The one crying in your trunk." She stopped 5 steps away. Her smile vanished, replaced by deep, genuine confusion. "Mister," she said quietly, "I've never had a son." She wasn't lying. I could see it in her eyes. There was madness there. Twisted truth. And in that moment, through the thick glass of the store, a sound came from outside. It wasn't knocking. It wasn't crying. It was laughter. Childish laughter. Loud, warped, rising into a low guttural growl that made the windows vibrate. It was coming from the Honda's trunk. I turned toward the window in horror. The trunk lid of the burgundy Accord was slowly rising on its own. From the darkness inside emerged a pale, elongated arm with unnaturally long fingers. It gripped the edge of the bumper. Behind me, the woman lunged forward, swinging the wrench. I didn't think. I grabbed a heavy glass jar of pickles from a shelf and hurled it straight into her face. The jar shattered. She screamed and staggered back, clutching her face. I spun toward the front door, grabbed a metal chair by the window, and slammed it into the glass with all my strength. The laminated pane cracked, but held. I hit it again. And again. On the third strike it gave way, dropping outward in one massive sheet. I dove through the broken frame, tearing my jacket on the shards. I ran for my car without looking back. I heard something crawl out of the Honda's trunk with a wet, slapping sound. I heard it drop heavily onto the pavement. And I heard that laughter. The laughter of an 8-year-old boy coming from the throat of something that had never been human. I jumped into my car, started the engine, and floored it. The tires screamed, leaving black streaks across the asphalt. In the rearview mirror, lit by the flickering gas station lamp, I saw the woman run out of the store. She wasn't watching me leave. She dropped to her knees before whatever had climbed out of the trunk and bowed her head like she was praying. And the creature towering over her in the desert night slowly turned its head toward me. I drove all the way to Reno without dropping below 100 miles an hour. By the time I reached the police station, the sun was already up. I told them everything, except the part about the monster. I said the woman had kidnapped a child, kept him in the trunk, then attacked me. State police sent 3 units. They called me back 4 hours later. The station was empty. Doors open. Glass shattered. Broken pickle jar and the woman's blood on the floor. But no burgundy Honda. No cashier. No child. They checked the surveillance system. It had been disabled a week earlier. They told me she'd probably fled to Mexico. Case closed for lack of evidence. But I know the truth. I know she didn't flee anywhere. She's still out there, driving the empty desert highways at night. Pulling over on lonely shoulders and abandoned rest stops. Waiting. Waiting for some kind-hearted traveler to hear a child crying from the trunk and step a little closer. Because whatever sits in that trunk is always hungry. And it imitates voices perfectly. If you've listened this far, thank you. Night is dark, and full of things we cannot explain. Check your back seats. Don't stop on empty roads. And remember, sometimes a cry for help is only bait. Stay safe. And I'll see you again soon in the dark.